But beyond that, one thing that I'm not sure I want to do, but one thing that I found was pretty common in practice is charging guests to come on your podcast. I think Travis was
Mm.
talking to us a little bit about that. What are your thoughts on charging people to come onto your podcast? Apparently, it's more common in the industry than I knew.
It's super common. I actually reached, no, somebody reached out to me, a big business marketing podcast, and they're like, "Hey, we have seen your content. We like it. Would you be okay to come in an in-person podcast in Las Vegas?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, hell yeah, like I wanna do that, right?" So then they made me to sign an application and then fill out the form. And then at the end of the form, the last question was like, "Oh yeah, this is $6,000 to come on the podcast." You get me? So it is common, people do charge guests to be on the podcast. Another one is Entrepreneurs on Fire. Remember we talked about that person of Funnel Hacking Life where he had to pay, I believe it was $2,000 to come on his podcast, and it was just very really good structure. And then at the end of the podcast, he just logged out. Right? He didn't say bye to the guests or nothing. But yeah, it's super common. But I'm not sure at what point you can do that. You get me? I mean, we can do it right now if you want to, right? If people want to get exposure. But just how you say, we're in the growing the podcast still. Section, right? We're still growing this podcast. Eventually, when we have, I don't know, more than 1,000 views per episode or 10,000 views per episode, then people are gonna be more interested on jumping in so they can get more exposure for their brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're probably a little premature to start charging people. I don't know if that's something we're going to do anyways, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's a future uh potential revenue stream, I guess. And it would be one of those things where I'm sure if we have the reach or the viewership that many product creators or experts would be happy to pay because let's be honest, it's still going to be cheaper than paying for ads. And that's really what it all comes down to is selling attention, I guess, right?
Exactly. And right now, what we're doing is we're doing the affiliate marketing side of it right now for the podcast. But all the results that we're getting because we are generating money, like we said, this is like the first profitable month for the podcast. We can use all those results, right? And then pitch it to other brands, pitch it to other people to come on the podcast. Hey, we launched this episode and we made blah 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 type of money, right? So it's like it's getting sales. That's the most important thing, it's getting sales. And then from there, people are gonna be more interested to come on the podcast because their audience convert, and that's really important to actually keep thinking about as well.
Yeah, and that's where the value comes, and that's why it's so important to stay true to who you are and work and focus on the core audience because that's where the value comes in is when the audience converts. It was like when we were at Funnel Hacking Live and Perry Belcher was talking about his email newsletters and how much an email newsletter can sell for. Well, what happens? Let's say you build an email newsletter, which is exactly the same thing as a podcast for the most part. If a brand comes on and says, "Hey, we'll pay you $10,000, for example, for a series of 3 emails to promote our product," and if it converts at a high rate for them, they'll just turn around and buy the email list from you for a lot of money.
Hmm.
And not that we're going to sell the podcast, but that's the same kind of idea. Is if we can show case studies from results that have come because of this, right? Hey, this person came on and made $2,000 in sales. Well, then the other product creators will be like, yeah, that sounds great. I'll come on, spend an hour of my time, get more exposure and make some sales. And that's what it comes down to is leveraging your past results, just like you can
Exactly.
leverage your past guests,
I
right?
was
If
just
we're
gonna say
looking
that
to
too.
reach out, yeah, if you're looking to reach out to guests who you think, oh, I don't know if I can get them on my podcast, but that'd be a great interview because they're well known. If we reach out to someone who we're on the fence about whether or not we can get them on the podcast, what's the first thing we do? Hey, want to invite you on the podcast. We've interviewed past guests such as Dave Sharp, Lauren Tickner, and we just start, rattling off, and then Travis Chappell, and we start rattling off the names, Jonathan Montoya, Jacob Karras, people who are known, and that adds authority to our podcast. And they're like, oh yeah, those are some pretty good names. I'll come on there as well. And so you can always leverage the past guests and
Yeah.
even case studies if you have them to attract future attention and future guests.
And also the results, right, that we're getting as well. And that's super important. Well, I think that's it, right? What other ways do you think?
That's all I know. If I knew
Yeah.
more, I'd probably be using them. But that's a pretty good start. Once again, that just to summarize, affiliate products and your own products or community are a great way to start while you look for the long term from YouTube. I think is our main focus, right? Control it until it controls itself.
Exactly.